everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you guys my mid-August reading wrap-up. I have 23 books to talk about in today's video. So I've read 23 books in just about 16 days, which is probably the most that I've ever read in any given like 2-ish weeks or something like that. But to be fair to myself and to you guys, a lot of these books are novellas, so that's how I've been able to read so much. So because I have so many books to talk about, let's just jump right into it. First up, we have Stalker by Jessica Cain. Of course, there's always going to be at least one Jessica Cain novella featured in these wrap-ups. And as you can probably tell from the title and everything, this is one of her stalker romances. I love when Jessica Cain writes a stalker romance, and this one I would say is like the lightest of the 3 stalker romances that I've read from her. I mean, yes, there is stalking going on, the hero specifically stalking the heroine, but it's not as stalkery as the other 2 that I've read. So if you're kind of looking to dip your feet into her stalker romances, I would say check this one out. I also really enjoy that this one is between Lula and Vale. They are step siblings, which is usually not a trope that I enjoy. However, these 2 characters become step siblings when they're well into adulthood. Vale is a Navy SEAL and he has been abroad since their parents got married to each other, and so Lula has been writing letters to Vale to try to get to know him and to try to bring him comfort while he's overseas. And so he just thought that she was some teenager, like some high school girl, you know, definitely not a woman. And so when he comes home and meets her and sees her for the first time and realizes that she is a woman, she's also plus sized, yeah, he kind of immediately falls in love with her. I had a fun time with this one. I gave it 4 stars. Definitely not one of my absolute favorites from Jessica Cain, but still a really fun time as usual. Plenty of steamy scenes, plenty of daddy kink as well. So yeah, recommend this one for sure. Before I move on to the next book, I just want to point out that because I have so many books to talk about in today's video, definitely check out my Goodreads. I always link that down in the description below in my link tree. In case you guys want to see my more in-depth thoughts about all of these books, I'm just going to try to give some bullet points in this video, but yeah, definitely check out those Goodreads reviews if you're interested. But the next book that I have to talk about is Isn't It Bromantic by Lyssa Kay Adams. This is the 4th book in the Bromance Book Club romance series. So to say that I was excited going into this book would be quite the understatement. You guys probably know by now that the Bromance Book Club series so far is definitely one of my top favorite romance series ever. I enjoyed this one, but I definitely did not love it like I did the previous book. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. Let me just tell you a little bit of what this is about though. We are centering around Vlad, who is known as the Russian in the previous books. He was definitely more of a comic relief character, and now we're seeing that he is the main character in this book. We see that he got married to this woman, Elena, some years earlier, kind of a green card situation, but they're also childhood friends, and Vlad has kind of been wanting something more with her, with their marriage, but there's a lot of things going on with Elena's character that she just doesn't feel like that's possible, essentially. And so yeah, definitely a lot of angst going on between these 2 characters. Something going on in this book that I really loved, however, is that Vlad is actually writing his own romance novel, and you can actually see it on the cover. It's a World War II era historical romance, and I adored seeing excerpts of that book in this. Like, that was one of my absolute favorite parts of this book. I also loved seeing the Bromance Book Club gang again. I love all of these characters so much. So those 2 things were definitely my favorite part of this book, and also just Vlad in general. He's such a lovable character, such a sweet man. But I didn't love Elena. I can kind of understand why she did the things that she did throughout this book. But I just kind of feel like Vlad deserved better for a love interest. I don't know. And then after seeing in the author's note that Lyssa Kay Adams never actually planned to give Vlad his own book until the fans demanded it, it actually kind of makes sense, because to me, this book, I don't know, it kind of felt like it needed more planning. Fortunately, I am a bit disappointed, but I still give it 4 stars. Like I said, I will always love the Bromance Book Club in general. Next up we have Taken by His Bully by Logan Warner. I was really excited about this novella. It's actually a novella series because as far as I know, this is a male identifying author, which is really interesting. And the premise is that it's male, and the romance is between these two men who one of the men was bullied by the other when they were back in high school, and now they're back in each other's lives when they're adults. So that premise immediately drew me in. Also, I remember seeing in the synopsis that there was a BDSM club involved as well. At the end of the day, I found the execution of this story to be weird, and I also found the writing to be kind of clunky and awkward, so didn't really work for me. I don't plan on continuing on with the series. So next up we have The Duke Buys a Bride by Sophie Jordan. This is book 3 in Sophie Jordan's Rogue Files series, and I was really excited going into this installment because we're finally getting Marcus's happily ever after. Marcus is the Duke of Autenbury, who has been heavily featured in the first 2 books of this series, and the premise of this one was very unique for me. I had never read a historical romance like this, but essentially Alice, our heroine, is put into a wife auction. There's a lot of things going on with her situation as to why she's put into a wife auction, but basically she had kind of made a deal with a childhood friend of hers that he would buy her at the auction, but that friend doesn't show up, and now she's terrified that somebody awful is going to buy her, and Marcus just happens to be there, and he sees this woman being sold at an auction, and so he thinks he's just buying her freedom. Little does he know he's actually buying her as his wife, and things go on from there. There's a travel plot involved, so if you love those kind of stories, I think you'd enjoy this. There's also a lot of there's only one bed trope going on, which is another trope that I really enjoy. So I give this 4 stars. I always have a fun time with Sophie Jordan. Like I said, it was fun to see Marcus finally get his happily ever after. Next up we have An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahira Mafi. I was so excited about going into this book. I feel like I've been saying that about all of the books that I've talked about in this video so far, but I was looking forward to this one so much because I absolutely adored A Very Large Expansive Sea, which Tahira Mafi came out with, I want to say in 2018. So I was hoping that this book would be just as amazing, and it's another kind of contemporary from Tahira Mafi, though this takes place in 2003. So this is chronicling the aftermath of 9/11, going into the Iraq War and all of those things, and we're following Shadi, who is a Muslim main character. Most of the characters in this book are Muslim. And she's just dealing with a lot. Her brother has died, I think maybe the year before. So she's dealing with the loss of a sibling, a loss of a loved one. There's a lot going on, like she has no relationship with her father anymore because she basically blames him for her brother's death. Her mother is not in a good place. I want to say content warning for self-harm and cutting, as well as a suicide attempt. Like, this book is heavy, heavier than A Very Large Expansive Sea for sure. I don't know what to say about this book. I gave it 3 stars. I think it's just a really sad story. It starts off sad and it also ends kind of sad. There's a romance in here between Shadi and this guy Ali that I kind of liked, but I kind of didn't see the connection between these 2 characters. And then I do want to point out that I've seen quite a few Own Voices reviews from Muslim readers saying that they really did not like the Muslim representation in this. So I would be aware of that before going into this. Next up we have Sidetracked, which is book 2 in St. Abby's Mind F series. For those of you guys that don't know, this is a 5 novella series about Lana and Logan. They meet in the first book and they start a romance with each other, but yeah, they're definitely doomed from the start because Lana is a serial killer. She specifically is killing off people that did something really terrible to her 10 years before, and then Logan, her love interest, is an FBI agent who specifically investigates serial killers. So yeah, this was just book 2. I can't really say anything about the plot without spoiling book 1. I thought it was a really solid continuation. I also gave this 4 stars. Next up we have Any Duchess Will Do by Tessa Dare. This is the final full novel of the Spindle Cove series, and I was really looking forward to this one specifically because this is one of the few books in this series that everybody loves. Same with A Week to Be Wicked. And I think this is my favorite book of the series, which is really saying a lot because A Week to Be Wicked is also a fantastic book. but this one was just amazing for so many different reasons. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the plot though. We have Griffin, he's a duke. His diabolical mother takes him to Spindle Cove, which is the village that this series is based on, to select a bride, and he decides to kind of troll her, and he picks Pauline, who is the serving girl at the inn in Spindle Cove. So because she's the serving girl, he decides that she would be like the worst possible duchess ever. And so Griffin's mother offers to take Pauline to London with them, and it becomes kind of a My Fair Lady plot. She wants to see if she can make her into a proper duchess, and along the way, Griffin and Pauline, of course, fall in love. There's just so many things done right in this book. I'm gonna reference my Goodreads review, but I said, you know, we've got the Pygmalion-inspired plotline. Griff has amazing character development. I do want to say content warning for loss of a child in this as well, but I love Griff's character development. I also adored Pauline's quick-witted sassiness and Griff's diabolical mother. I loved seeing the developing relationship between Pauline and Griff's mother. Like, that was just a really fun dynamic to see. Like I've kind of already mentioned, we've got a rake hero with a devastating backstory. We love to see that in historical romances. And as usual, we've got Dare's amazing sense of humor and the entertaining people of Spindle Cove. So what's not to love about this book? It's absolutely everything. Next, I want to talk about Lord Dashwood Missed Out by Tessa Dare. So this is a novella in the Spindle Cove series that follows the events of Any Duchess Will Do. So this is essentially an extended epilogue for all of the Spindle Cove characters that we've seen in previous books, but it's also a second chance romance between Nora and Lord Dashwood. So their story is basically that Nora was wronged by Lord Dashwood in the past, and so she decides to write this pamphlet that's like a love letter to every young lady who has been overlooked by a gentleman, and it's an instant bestseller. And so she's been invited to Spindle Cove to talk about her pamphlet and all of that. And so she ends up running into Spindle Cove characters, and it's a whole thing. Yeah, I mean, I had a fun time with this one. I will admit Lord Dashwood is kind of an asshole at times, but like, I'm fine with it. It's still a fun time because it's Tessa Dare. Next up, we have Talk Bookish to Me by Kate Bromley. This was such a fun book. I actually got an e-arc of this off of NetGalley, and I think more people should read it because it read as kind of a love letter to romance readers, authors, bookstagrammers, and more. So we have our main character, Kara. She is a historical romance author, and she's also a romance bookstagrammer. And one of the things I loved about this book was reading the excerpts from the historical romance novel that she's trying to write throughout the story. This is also a very angsty second chance romance between her and this guy Ryan, who she dated back in college. They ended up breaking up on not so good of terms, and now he's back in her life, I want to say about 10 years later. And I thought that that romance was all really done well. Like, this was just a really fun time, but with some solid angst thrown in as well. Very solid, gave it 4 stars. I think that a lot of romance readers would have a fun time reading this one. Oh, I actually read an entire romance novella series in the last couple of weeks. This is called the Twin Swap series by Cassie Mint. The first novella is Swapped Bride. So basically this series is broken up into like 2 little chunks. So the premise of this first little duet in the series is about Nora and Billy. They are a set of twins, and this is so messed up, but their father kind of faked Nora's death basically because she's scarred, like physically scarred on her face, and he couldn't deal with that. And so she just lives in this penthouse by herself, and then Billy is like the pretty twin, and she's kind of a famous influencer, it sounds like, or a model, or she wants to be a model, I can't really remember. And so basically their father gets in trouble with his business rival, and so the business rival, who is known as the Fox, and so basically the Fox, I think his name is Garrett, I think Garrett makes Nora and Billy's father marry off Billy to him as retribution for something that he did to him. And so the twins decide to swap. So Nora, the scarred twin, ends up marrying Garrett, and things go on from there. Yeah. kind of ridiculous. This author reminds me a lot of Jessica Cain because there's kind of ridiculous plots going on. They're also very short novellas where the characters fall in love within the span of a few hours. That's definitely what happens here. This is also a billionaire romance. And then the second part of this little duet, I want to say it's called Stolen Bride. And so this one is about Billy, and this one is a short and steamy bodyguard romance, because basically what happens is when the two twins swap, Billy realizes that she needs to leave as soon as possible, and so she leaves with her bodyguard. And so it's a road trip romance. They end up falling in love along the way, but they've been in love with each other for years. They just haven't confessed their feelings to one another. So yeah, fun time. Gave both of these 4 stars. And then like the second part of this series is about another set of twins. Like, I'm sorry this is so convoluted, but we have Fake Model. So this little part of the series is about a set of twins whose names are Coral, and I cannot remember the other twin's name. Oops. But they end up switching places to switch jobs, essentially, because the other twin is a model. She ends up breaking her arm, and so she gets Coral to swap places with her to do this photo shoot so that she doesn't get a bad reputation for canceling gigs. And then Coral's job is to be a maid for this billionaire, and so the other twin ends up taking that job for the day. And so this one, Fake Model, is about Coral falling in love with this guy Archer, who is the photographer doing this photo shoot. And then Fake Maid is about the other twin falling in love with the billionaire who is actually Coral's boss. So yes, all of these were just really fun. I recommend Cassie Mint if you've maybe tried reading Jessica Cain and she was just a little too bonkers for you. I think that you'd really enjoy Cassie Mint. Also, there's no daddy kink in any of the novellas that I've read by this author, and I know that that can be off-putting for people trying to get into Jessica Cain because she does write a lot of daddy kink. So yeah, I think that this would be a fun series to try. Gave them all 4 stars. All right, next up we have quite the angsty romance. This is Forget Me Not by QB Tyler. I was so excited going into this romance because Jess from Peace Love Books raves and raves and raves about this book, and for very good reason in my opinion. But this is a second chance marriage and trouble story. So the premise with this one is that we have Olivia and Bennett. They've been married for probably, I think, 3-ish years, something like that, maybe longer. But Bennett actually cheated on Olivia, and so they have been separated for quite a while, and their divorce is going to be finalized within the next month, I believe. But then Bennett gets into a really bad car accident and actually gets amnesia and forgets the last 2 years of his life. So when he wakes up in the hospital, he thinks that him and Olivia are perfectly happy and in love, but Olivia's like, no, you cheated on me and we're getting divorced. Okay, thanks. And so he's just devastated by this news because in his mind, like, everything is going perfectly well in their marriage. So things go on from there. This is definitely really, really, really angsty and heavy at times. Content warning for miscarriages and cheating. And I feel very conflicted about this book because is Bennett a piece of shit? I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know if the author gave him enough of a redemption arc. Like, because is cheating ever forgivable? Like, it's messy. This is a messy book for sure. I also put in here, you know, I don't even really know if I really liked Olivia all that much, even though I understand her motivations and actions a lot more than Bennett's. And then I said at the same time, both of these main characters felt like real flawed people. So clearly I have very conflicting thoughts, but I still gave this 5 stars because I thought it was beautifully written, and yeah, it just felt like such a real and authentic story. So I highly recommend it. Just know that it's a very heavy book. Next up, I read The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. This is a graphic novel series that I actually never really planned on reading, but I saw that it was on Kindle Unlimited, so I thought, why not? I think this is more of a middle grade graphic novel series, but it could be elementary as well. It definitely reads very young. This is just so cute, sweet, and whimsical. It just takes place in this world where there's these really cute little dragons that have like tea leaves on them. And yeah, like, it's just really adorable. Also has really great LGBTQIA+ representation as well as disability representation. So if this interests you at all, I would definitely recommend it. Next up, we have just a spectacular book, and that is Flash Fire by TJ Klune. This is book 2 in his The Extraordinaries series, which I read that first book back in January, and it's still one of my favorite books of the year. Just absolutely phenomenal. Like literally everything TJ Klune writes that I have read is just like absolute perfection. And just to tell you a little bit about this series, this is a YA series about our main character, Nick. He's gay, he has ADHD. He lives in a world where superheroes exist, and he is obsessed with this superhero Shadowstar in the first book, and he writes fan fiction about Shadowstar and like inserts himself as Shadowstar's love interest, and like it's just so wonderful. It's campy, it's hilarious. I can't really talk about this book without spoiling the first book, but just know that it's gay superheroes. We meet even more amazing superheroes in this installment, including a drag queen superhero who conducts electricity, and her drag name is Misconduct. Isn't that absolutely incredible? Yeah, I just love the characters in this series so much. I also really appreciated that this book really addressed the sort of glorification of cops that was happening in the first book. That is something that I do remember kind of rubbing me the wrong way a little bit, and it definitely upset a lot of readers. But I think that this book really addressed that in a great way. Just like with the first book too, there were plot twists in this that I thought were pretty predictable, but I just didn't mind because everything else about this book is just so well done. Like the sense of humor alone is absolutely everything. Like, I could just go on and on about this book in this series, but please check it out if you haven't. Next up, I'll quickly mention The Beach by R.S. Gray. This is just a really cute romance novella that takes place at the beach. Specifically, the two main characters are on vacation, I believe somewhere in Mexico. It's a cute friends to lovers romance, and yeah, there's nothing much to say. Just a very short and sweet novella. This definitely makes me want to read more from R.S. Gray. I have read one of her other full-length novels in the past, but yeah, after reading this novella, I definitely need to check out more of her rom-coms. Next up, I read What If You and Me by Ronnie Lauren. This is the follow-up to Yes and I Love You, which was a book that I read a couple of months ago and absolutely adored. This is a romance companion series that takes place in New Orleans, which if you don't know, that's where I'm from, that's where I live, is in the New Orleans area, and so I really appreciate that about this series. But this book in particular is about Andy. She is a horror novel, movie enthusiast, and podcast person, and she specifically investigates true crime on her podcast. So that's one of the things that I thought was really cool about this book, is that it's like a love letter to horror movie / novel enthusiasts and readers and people who just enjoy that kind of thing. And then this is a romance with Hill, who is a former firefighter. He recently moved in next door to Andy, and so yeah, there's grumpy sunshine goodness going on in this. They slowly become friends, and then over the course of the book they become something more. Just like with Yes and I Love You, this is a very emotional yet very steamy romance. So yeah, I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Next up, I read Diamond Fire by Ilona Andrews. This is book 3.5 in their Hidden Legacy series. So this is a book that takes place after the first trilogy, like the first part of this series. And this novella is essentially from Catalina's point of view, who is the younger sister to Nevada, who was the main character of that first part of the series. So now we're getting her younger sister's point of view in preparation for the next part of the Hidden Legacy series, which is going to focus on Catalina. And the story of this novella also centers around Nevada and Rogan's wedding. I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I don't think it's the most necessary thing to read if you are reading this series. Like, it was fun to be back in this world with these characters, but there was really nothing plot-wise going on that I thought was all that necessary. All right, next up we have The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. Oh my goodness, we've got the 3rd and final book in the Poppy War trilogy. To say that I was highly anticipating reading this after reading Dragon Republic would be putting it very lightly. But I also went into this with a bit of hesitation because I saw some reviews on Goodreads where a lot of people were giving this like 2 or 3 stars. And after reading it, I could understand why. My first reaction after finishing this book was to give it maybe 3 stars, but then I watched some interviews that R.F. Kuang did, specifically this live show that the Subtle Asian Book Club did with her. I'm gonna link that down in the description below. I highly recommend watching it if you've read this entire series and you're just left confused. I feel like I can't really say anything about this book because it's the finale of a trilogy, you know? But I will say, of course, I was shocked by the ending. There were other things going on in this book that I was like, wait, why did she write it that way? But like I said, after watching the interview, things made a lot more sense for sure. And one of the things that I like that this series addresses is the reality of war. I think in a lot of fantasy series, wars are written in like a neat little bow. Like once the war is over, everything is sunshine and rainbows, and that's never the case in real life. And so this series is definitely more of like a realistic fantasy series, I would say, where we really get to see the aftermath of this civil war. And we see how it affects Rin. You know, it definitely has a very messy ending. It doesn't end the way most fantasy series do, so just know that going into it. So yeah, I think I ended up giving this 4 stars. If I had to give it a rating, I definitely didn't enjoy it as much as the first 2 books. But I understand why she wrote the book the way that she did. Next up, we have Hefty by Jessa Kane. Oh my goodness, shame on me for waiting this long to read this novella, because I can tell you right now, it is my favorite Jessa Kane novella. Absolute favorite, which is really saying a lot because you guys know that I've given quite a few of her novellas 5 stars, but this one takes the cake. This is one of only 2 novellas I think that she's written that are high school romances, and I need her to write more of them because in my opinion, I think that she knows how to write teenagers, and I think that these high school romances are just like so well done from her. But this is also one of her big boy romances, so our hero Zach is bigger, plus size, however you want to refer to him. Yeah, this is between Zach, who is on the football team at their high school, and then Jill, who is a cheerleader. And so this is kind of a childhood friends to lovers thing going on because Jill has been best friends with Zach's twin like their entire lives. And so yeah, there's just like all the mutual pining going on. They both also think that they are unworthy of each other. I had just so many butterflies in my stomach reading this, like swoon, like swoon city. The fact that Jessa Kane can make me care so much for 2 people in only about 60 pages is just absolutely insane. Ugh, just read this one, please, 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 please. Like if you are hesitant about reading Jessa Kane, just give this one a chance. I promise, you know, there's no daddy kink, there's nothing too weird going on in this one. It's just a really swoony time. I have 2 books left to talk about. We are almost there, guys. Next up we have Return to Me. This is a novella by Lucy Darling. The premise of this one really drew me in because it's about our 2 main characters. Victor essentially tricked the heroine, I can't remember her name, into marrying him. And so now she's on the run from him. Like she flew somewhere where there's a beach, I want to say maybe somewhere in Mexico or something, to escape him, and so he follows her. So it's like a little bit of a stalker romance, but at the same time she likes that he chases her, like she wants that to happen. So I gave this 4 stars, maybe leaning towards 3.5. Like I really liked the premise, and I had a fun time with this one, but it just wasn't as good as some other romance novellas that I've read. And last but certainly not least, we have a book that I actually finished earlier today, and that is 1 Week to Claim It All by Adriana Herrera. So this is a Harlequin desire romance. I haven't read a Harlequin romance in a really long time, but they're fun because they're really short. Like this audiobook was like 5 hours. And this one is about Rodrigo and Esmeralda. They are essentially both competing for the CEO job at this production company that Esmeralda's father owned, but he has now passed away. So it's also a second chance romance because Rodrigo and Esmeralda had a very short affair with each other like 10 years before or something like that. I enjoyed this one. I think I'd probably give it like 3.5 stars. I kind of wanted more page time to be developed to the romance in general. Like, I don't know. I feel like we just didn't get enough of that. So I didn't really believe that these two people like really loved each other. I believed that they had a very strong physical connection to each other, but yeah, I just feel like the romance could have been developed more. So I'm still looking forward to reading more from this author because I know that there's some backlist titles of hers that are really popular in the romance community. All right, guys, that is going to be it for this very long mid-month wrap up. I feel like I've been filming for hours. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about some of the books that you've been reading and loving in the month of August. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe. And I thank you so much in advance if you do. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!